Jerry Schumacher, University of Oregon. Thoughts? Did you see this coming? What are your thoughts on it? Is it a good hire? What's going to happen to the Bowerman Track Club? What's going to happen to Ben Thomas and the other distance coaches there? It seems kind of wild, but we're going to see Jerry Schumacher, who rarely does interviews, all of a sudden now be the head of the most prominent university track and field program in the country.
Well, in that 30 seconds, you touched on 7 different topics, all of which are incredibly relevant, ranging from how is this going to work in terms of logistics of his pro obligations? What's he going to be like as the head of the most visible program? I was a bit surprised. I agreed with you that he was probably on that short list early on, but to see it actually happen is a bit surprising. Now, if you take a step back, makes sense. He's a Nike guy. He's a big name, obviously a distance coach. Oregon has history and tradition in the distance, but there's college and or coaching and non-coaching stuff that makes this pretty interesting. On the coaching side of things, hasn't coached in college since 2008. We all know him as the Bowerman Track Club coach, coached at Wisconsin. Before that, there's probably some athletes out there, some potential recruits who have no recollection of him coaching in college. Their only memory of him is of the Bowerman Track Club. So it's an interesting situation where you have a guy who's established in the pro ranks going back to college, which also brings on the recruiting side of things, which is a ton of work, right? When you're a professional coach, do you have to recruit? It may be a little bit, bring the big name in and talk to him for a little bit, but it's not the year-round grind that is recruiting. Now he'll have assistants, obviously. I'm assuming Shalane Flanagan is going to come along with him as well. So he's not going to have to do it alone, but it is just a different type of job. He also coaches the Bowerman Track Club. It's my understanding that's going to continue as well. So how does he balance those two things? That's not a small group. It's not one or two pros on the side. It's an established brand name within the sport. And my final point on the coaching side of this, and I'll let you get in here before we touch on the non-coaching stuff. The pressure is going to be high to win. It's not as if this program is in the doldrums. They've won national titles very recently. They've pulled off back to back to back to back titles very recently. This program is positioned to win. This program has been winning. So it's not as if there's going to be a long time to figure stuff out and get things back to the way they were. This is already a program that I think is expected to win. This coaching change did not happen with a program that was at a low point. Sure, they weren't solid this year on the men's and women's side outdoors, but I mean, you go back just a year ago, and they were one of the top programs in the nation. A couple people stay instead of going pro. Maybe they're right back in that same spot. But on the coaching side, those were the major points that I thought were noteworthy when looking at this move.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the. I mean, we previewed like who would be a good, great candidate for this job. We were looking at Dilgy Taylor of BYU, Mike Smith, NAU, and then Jerry Schumacher of Bowerman. Like that was what we looked at as the big three, especially on the distance side. We didn't really see any sprint-based coaches that really were going to be ready for that job because they kind of all had good situations, especially in the SEC and Edric Floral and Texas. Carol Smith Gilbert, she just got to Georgia. The odds of her uprooting her life from USC to Georgia to Oregon, kind of hard for that to happen. Mike Holloway in
Mhm.
Florida, he's the GOAT there. He has no reason to travel 3,000 miles to the opposite side of the country. So it was looking like it was going to be a distance-based coach, and they got arguably the best distance coach in the country. He has what, 5 U.S. athletes competing at world championships, and then add in a few more international athletes. Uh, the guy knows how to coach distance running, knows how to get the best, and he has experience with college, but he left that. He left college because he wanted to be in the pro
Yeah.
world, and now he's going back. And you have to think like, what would be the reason of going back to college? Because it's just Oregon that only job out there that is worth ending your, pro only world? You know, I guess so. I mean, if University of Colorado opened up, or if uh,
Mhm,
University of Portland or other NAU or any other schools opened up, would Jerry have had any interest in joining those teams? If the Wisconsin job opened up, would he have had interest in being the head coach at Wisconsin? I don't know.
mhm.
Um, it just seems
Well,
like,
North
North
Carolina,
Carolina, yeah,
they wanted the North Carolina job. I mean, that was a couple of years back now. So I think that was the signal that he wanted to get into college coaching. This one, I mean, he's just 2 hours down the road. It's a little easier to relocate the pro group
yeah,
there, and obviously the resources that come along with an Oregon job are a lot different than virtually any other program. Which brings me to the non-coaching side of things, which is so fascinating because this is unlike any other job in the country. It is a public facing job. And you can say, all right, well, every coach is public facing in track and field. That's not true. There are plenty of jobs out there where a coach on a college campus can be mostly anonymous, right? They can field a
yes,
competitive team, and that's enough for the athletic director. That's enough for the stakeholders at that university. That is not Oregon. That is not Oregon. Oregon, if there's one exception, it is in Eugene. It is important to be an ambassador to the sport. It is important if you want to fill those stands to make home meets a priority, run your athletes, run your star athletes, which is where this decision is the most interesting to me because everything we know about Jerry Schumacher is the opposite of that. Just in terms of being open and speaking with the media or speaking with the public. You've told that story before. You had to twist his arm to talk after Shalane Flanagan won the New York City Marathon. Just didn't want to talk, didn't want to do media. Okay, there's the amount of racing that goes on. Now pros are different than collegians, and it's not like he can't adjust it all. But is Bowerman Track Club the type of team that runs a whole bunch, Gordon? In your experience?
nope. They run
No.
in silos in the middle of the woods. Time trials.
Yeah. Yeah. They run what's required of them.
Yeah.
Not nothing more, nothing less, you could say. Now there's some exceptions here or there, but he likes to do things on his terms. And I understand that from a coaching perspective. But again, that's not Oregon. That's not Oregon. And this all comes in the context with a brand new stadium that costs $270 million, a desire to fill that stadium. And maybe some of the issues with attendance are going to change, a year on when there's not 7 high profile meets at Hayward and there's other issues that are going to get alleviated in the next year. Maybe some of that goes away, but that's where I thought this was an interesting decision because I looked at this as part a coaching role, but also part somebody who's going to help make Eugene be that vital destination in track and field again. And he seems like his, I should say this, his actions, the way he's conducted his programs, his pro program, um, really haven't lent themselves to, hey, we're going to do a ton of outreach. It's more, hey, we're going to focus on us and win medals. Which again, nothing wrong with that. That was his job to win medals. But with Oregon, University of Oregon, there's more that goes along with it, or at least there has been in the past.
What do you think the um not the waterfall effect, is that the right phrase? I don't know.
Butterfly effect,
Domino effect that this
domino
is going to
effect.
cause? Do
Okay,
you think it's just going to be no dominoes? It's like, all right, they're just
no,
all training on Hayward Field now, and we're all good. All the Bowerman Track Club people, and we're gonna switch out the red for green, and we're good. Or do you think there's gonna be like, do you see someone like Ben Thomas taking over OTC maybe, and then OTC all of a sudden is highlighted with Cooper Tier and Cole Hawker? Like, do you see something like that potentially happening?
I think Bowerman is going to the first part of your question. I think Bowerman is going to come to Eugene. Now, maybe some athletes, veteran athletes who don't want to move, are going to carpool and they're just going to get a ton of miles on the I-5. I don't know.
Do
Maybe they'll come
they
down there couple
do
times a
they
week.
change their
But
logo to green?
no, I think you keep. No, I think you keep it. I think you keep it. Um, it's already named Bowerman Track Club, and he's going to the University of Oregon. This isn't a huge stretch. It's not like he's going to, you know, the middle of Kansas to
Yeah.
put together a club here. Um, but the Ben Thomas thing is interesting because I think most people think he's been somewhere between extremely successful and wildly successful at Oregon. Correct?
Yeah.
We say that, and then you have two of the bright shining stars of U.S. mid distance running in Cooper Tier and Cole Hawker training with him. So if he goes to take another coaching job somewhere else, yeah, the Cooper and Cole go with him. Does he go to OTC? It was my understanding, like we talked about last week, that OTC was winding down, that the investment wasn't going to be there long term. But if you move Ben Thomas to OTC, that doesn't signal winding things down. That signals you're ratcheting things up. So I think, yeah, that's the final domino effect here. Is what because they're the people that are impacted at the end of this. The athletes trained by the guy who we assume is no longer going to be there, like Hawker and Tier. But yeah, you have you have Nike has Union Athletics Club in Portland with Pete Julian, and then Bowerman in Eugene with Schumacher. What happens with Thomas Tier Hawker is still a question mark.
I just know that Jerry's going to do more interviews in the month of August slash September than he has done for the past like 10 years.
Well, I'm having
It's going to
trouble
be wild.
imagining. So you've gone to a million of those pre NCAA press conferences,
Yeah.
whether it's for cross, indoor, or outdoor. Will that be his first? I mean, it's going to got to be his first like open media availability since he left Wisconsin. I don't remember. I don't know if Wisconsin was doing media availabilities back in '07. But when is the last time he spoke before a meet? It's just an odd scenario to picture him up there talking. And maybe he's at the stage of his career where he's going to do a 180 and he's going to be all cool with that. But that would be surprising to me because usually people are the way they are and they stay that way. But it just, if you put Lanana, right, Vin Lanana on one side, in terms of, okay, there's a lot in common, right? Distance coach, guy who worked with Nike before, and has a big name in the distance running world. But the way Lanana interacts and interacted with the public is just so much different than the way Schumacher has. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day. So it's exciting. We'll see how it goes. I'm excited to see, you know, them at their first, cross country championships, see how University of Oregon does under Schumacher. It'll be interesting. And then now all of a sudden we're just going to see Bowerman Track Club kind of go into all the same meets that Oregon goes to. Be interesting to see how that plays out, and I'm excited. It'll
Yeah.
be change is good. Change is fun. Now we just have to wait and see what happens. So.